All right, we are going to begin looking at fungi again. We started looking at them a little bit at the beginning of the year, but we're going to revisit them now. What do we know about fungi already? And we talked a lot about fungi and how they're decomposers and how they create mushrooms to reproduce, but we're going to really look at some more specifics about those. We're going to get right into it. So if we look at a tree, this is like a cladogram tree of all living things and how closely related they are, we can actually see that fungi are more closely related to animals than they are to plants, even though plants are oftentimes what people think mushrooms are. They're not part of that group at all. So if we think about fungi, why is it that fungi are more like animals than plants? Um, we think about that plants have to make their own food, fungi cannot. So that's a really big difference between plants and fungi. We're going to move on and kind of look at that. So what you chose from your menu was either 2-column notes to fill out while I go over these notes in this slideshow, or you could do a top-down web, and you can stop the video at any time throughout. As you go through, you only need to write down the words and phrases that are highlighted in yellow. So again, as I'm going through, I'm going to go through quickly, but you can stop and rewind the video, whatever you need to do to get your notes down. So let's begin with, what do fungi eat? Now, they're not going to be like animals where they're necessarily always hunting things, or that they are going to be, actually moving around and finding their food, but actually there are some similarities. Most fungi are decomposers that feed on dead or decaying organisms. Really important to nutrient cycling. We saw this in ecosystems, that without them, carbon can't get out of living things that have died and back into the soil to be recycled and used again in new growing plants. So that's what many of them do. They are decomposers. Not all fungi are decomposers, though. Some are going to be symbiotic. And if you remember what symbiotic means, it means two organisms working together for the benefit of the other organism. So there are symbiotic fungi that receive their energy in the form of carbohydrates like sugars directly from a plant or an algae partner. So these are the kind of symbiotic fungi we have here that are working with plants or algae. So some examples are, and we're going to really focus on this first type of fungi, mycorrhizal fungi. They live on plant roots, and they live on the majority of plants actually in an ecosystem. And like I said, we're going to talk more about that as we go on with this fungi unit. And then another kind of partner, a symbiotic partnership, are lichens. And we talked about lichens with John when he was here from the Harris Center. And you see lichens everywhere. They grow on stone walls and on trees and basically in everything. They're that leafy green stuff. And that's actually that symbiosis between a fungi and an algae. So that's why you see that green. The algae collects sunlight and then creates sugars from that. And the fungi will actually feed off of those sugars and provide the algae a place to stay. So you can kind of look at this here, that the fungal body, the hyphae, is providing a shelter for the algae and you can see that they're kind of, placing themselves in here. And in turn, the algae is making sugars, which the fungi are using to grow and live. So that is an example of that fungal relationship. And this is a really interesting picture to talk about kind of how a lichen can tell us something about the environment. So this is a picture from northern Italy, a map. And on the left here, it's showing that the areas in green have a higher diversity or number of different species of lichens. And the areas that are in red have a much lower diversity. Very few species of lichens live there. And if we look over here at the same map of the same area, the coloring is actually indicating something different. It's indicating lung cancer mortality. So how many people per capita are dying of lung cancer. So these areas in red are showing that there's many more people per capita dying of lung cancer, and that corresponds with this area where there's fewer lichens. And then this area where there's fewer people dying of lung cancer, there are more variety of lichens. So what this kind of tells us is that our lichens can tell us, if there are more lichens in the area, that the air is cleaner, and better for people. So that they're an interesting bioindicator, something we've talked about before. So fungi can also, even though it seems crazy, be predatory and move to catch prey. So predatory fungi would catch and digest other organisms just like an animal predator. So one of the things that many predatory fungi are feeding off of are nematodes, which are basically really tiny worms that live in the soil. You can actually find videos on this of these fungi growing to kind of catch them. This is kind of like a little fishing hook for this nematode here over on this right-hand picture. The nutrition is still being absorbed, but instead of like living on like a dead log, these fungi instead are catching and then digesting their live prey. Pretty nasty for the prey, actually. So let's go back to thinking about, this is a new section in your notes. We've just talked about what they eat. Where do fungi live? So this should be a new section in either your top-down web or your 2-column notes. Fungi live in moist and dark environments. And what they do there is they break down and absorb nutrients from other organisms, like we just talked about. Mostly dead or decaying, that's what the majority of fungus is doing. And fungi don't just live in these moist, dark environments, but they're living pretty much on their food source, in it, or very, very close to it. They can't move fast. They're not, even if they're predatory, they're not fast like a lion or a cheetah. They have to, they move slowly, and so they have to live pretty close to their food source or right in it. And we can see that. We see mushrooms growing out of logs. If we peel a dead log apart, we'd see the mycelium, the white threads in there growing in the food source. So you can kind of see this in this picture here. These mushrooms are coming directly from this log because the body of the fungus is inside of this dead log, breaking it down. Moving on to the parts of the fungus, which is a different section in your notes. We can start with some of these parts that we've talked about before. First of all, the mycelium. This is the body of the fungus. It's the part that is breaking down and absorbing nutrients. It's not necessarily easy to see, but if we peel a dead log apart, we can see these white fuzzy parts, and that's the mycelium. Oftentimes people think the mushrooms are the body of the fungus, and they are not. The mushrooms are for reproduction only. They're not the main part of the fungus. They actually only bloom like a flower when the fungus is ready to reproduce. So this mycelium here, this is the body of the fungus. It's the main part of the fungus. So you should be writing that down in your notes. And so here we have, you can see the mycelium is kind of this lower part of the fungus. It's in the soil here. And then when the fungus is ready to reproduce, it sprouts a mushroom. And so mushrooms are like the fruit of the fungus, just like an apple on a tree. It is ready to spread either its seed. It's in this case the mushroom spreads spores, unlike an apple would spread seeds. But spores are similar to seeds. They are, when they fall in the right place, they're ready to grow a new fungus. Spores, they're just reproductive cells, and a mushroom's job is to spread the spores. So they create lots and lots and lots and lots of spores, so that they can do their best. That it increases the chance of them landing somewhere and having a new fungus grow from it. And then all of the parts of the mushroom are going to do something in order to help the fungus spread its spores. So you can see that we have the cap up here, the gills underneath, spores coming from the gills. And of course, we talked about how sometimes there are teeth instead of gills, or pores instead of gills. We have the stalk, or sometimes called the stipe or stem. And then inside the cells that are actually making up this whole body of the fungus, that are helping it grow, are the hyphae. They're long strands of cells that make up, they're the name of the cells that make up the mycelium and the mushroom itself. So we can see here that the mushroom is also called a fruiting body, and that, it kind of is synonymous with a fruit on a tree. Gills, like I said, sometimes pores or teeth, they contain the spores. That's their job. So this is what you're writing down in your notes, the things that are highlighted in yellow. The cap is going to protect the spores. So it has the cap, and then underneath are the gills, pores, or teeth, and that has the spores in it. So that's what the cap's job is, to protect them from above. The stalk, stem, stipe, whatever you've seen it called, is going to support the cap and help spread the spores. It's growing up high enough so that these spores can maybe be caught in the wind or be knocked about by an animal, and help them spread around. The hyphae, like I said, are these particular types of cells. They help build the fruiting body and the mycelium. That's the name of the type of cells that the fungi is grown with. And they are microscopic. So if you were to look at filaments of a mycelium under a microscope, you would see that the hyphae are like the building blocks of that fungus. And then, like I said, the mycelium, it's this collection of hyphae. It can be seen without a microscope. If you are peeling these things apart, you see that white fuzzy stuff. It is the body of the fungus. So I put this video in your learning menu if you would like to watch it. These are just supplementary videos if you would like to kind of watch any of them. And this is just a microscopic close-up of the hyphae, the long cells that are joined together in these long strands like threads or roots. So we're going to kind of skip past that. And then the final part of your notes is fungi reproduction. So again, you're just writing down what is in yellow. Mushrooms, like we talked about in the last part, are similar to fruit, like an apple or an orange or a berry. They hold reproductive cells. That is their job, is to help that fungus reproduce. The mushroom is also called the fruiting body, like a couple of slides ago said. The fungi reproduce by sending up a mushroom that sends out spores. The fungi isn't going to send up a mushroom unless it is mature and ready to reproduce, if the conditions are right. So it have to be kind of damp and ready to receive spores. The mushrooms hold spores, which are like seeds. When a spore lands in a new place, it can grow a new individual if the conditions are right. If it's like damp enough, warm enough, it's not just too disturbed, things like that. And I think that is the end of the notes. So again, if you need to, if you missed any parts, go back, rewind, rewatch, and make sure that you have made a copy of these notes and you've attached it in Classroom.